The classroom was filled with chatter, crayons scraping against paper, and the soft hum of excitement that only children could create. On the whiteboard, written in bright, cheerful letters, were the words, "Mother's Day tea this Friday." Beneath it, a colorful flyer listed the details. Tables of cookies and tea, a poetry recital, and handmade gifts presented proudly to mothers. Most of the children lit up with anticipation. They giggled as they described the dresses their mothers would wear, the smiles they would give, and the hugs they would share when they saw the cards decorated with glitter and flowers. To them, it was a celebration they had been waiting for, a chance to show love and be seen. But for Emma, the words on the board felt like stones pressing down on her chest. She sat quietly, staring at the flyer handed to her, her fingers fidgeting with the edges. At 7 years old, she had learned not to ask about her mother. Her world revolved around her dad, his rough hands that worked long hours, his tired smile that never failed to greet her, and his gentle reminders that she was loved more than anything else. He was her anchor, her safe place, her whole family. But he was not the person this event was designed for. As the day went on, whispers floated around her. Children glanced her way, some curious, others pitying, as if her difference was something to be discussed. Emma lowered her head, wishing to disappear. That evening, she stuffed the flyer deep into her backpack, not wanting to bring the weight of it home. Yet her father noticed. He always noticed. Later that night, as he emptied her bag to check for homework, the crumpled flyer slipped out. He read the cheerful words and felt his heart tighten. He knew instantly why Emma had been quieter that day, why her smile hadn't reached her eyes. The thought of her sitting alone during an event meant for mothers pierced him deeply. He stayed awake long after Emma went to bed, the flyer resting on the kitchen table in front of him. His mind wrestled with the truth. He was not her mother, and he could never fill that exact role. But he also knew one thing with certainty. He would not let her face that day alone. His love for her is fierce, unconditional, and unshakable. If there was a place where she needed him, he would stand there without hesitation. The week moved quickly, each day a mix of excitement for the other children and growing unease for Emma. She crafted her card half-heartedly, coloring hearts without joy, imagining how awkward it would feel to sit without anyone by her side. She never asked her dad about it, assuming he would stay away because it was meant for mothers. But while she carried quiet dread, her father carried determination. He ironed his best shirt, rehearsed the courage it would take, and promised himself he would walk into that room for her, no matter what anyone thought. When Friday morning arrived, Emma clutched her folded card nervously as she prepared for school. Meanwhile, her father tied his shoes with steady hands, ready to face the day that would test both his love and his courage. The moment was approaching, and neither of them knew how it would unfold. The cafeteria had been transformed into a cheerful space. Paper flowers hung from strings across the ceiling, and rows of tables were neatly arranged with pastel tablecloths. Plates of cookies and trays of juice boxes stood ready. On the stage at the front of the room, a banner stretched wide. "Happy Mother's Day Tea." The children filed in nervously with their mothers, each one holding a handmade card clutched tightly in small hands. Laughter and conversation filled the air as the women greeted one another, their voices warm and proud. The smell of cookies mixed with the chatter, and the atmosphere was one of celebration. Emma trailed behind the group, her eyes low, her steps small. Her handmade card weighed heavy in her palm. She had drawn her best hearts, written her neatest words, but she didn't know who would sit beside her. She slid into her seat quietly, hoping to be invisible, her cheeks burning under the awareness that the chair next to her was empty. And then, the sound of footsteps echoed across the polished floor. Heads turned, whispers rippled, and some of the mothers exchanged puzzled glances. Standing in the doorway was Emma's father. He wasn't dressed like the women around him. There was no soft floral dress or bright jewelry, but instead, a neatly pressed shirt and a nervous determination in his eyes. He carried himself with quiet courage, every step deliberate as he walked toward his daughter. Emma's eyes widened in surprise, her breath catching. She hadn't expected him to come. For a brief moment, the room seemed frozen. Children nudged one another, and hushed voices spread like a current. Why is her dad here? This is a mother's event. That's not right. But Emma didn't hear the whispers. All she saw was the man who never let her down. He slid into the chair beside her, and in that instant, the empty space she had dreaded all week disappeared. He wasn't a mother, but he was the one who packed her lunches, braided her hair when she asked, and sat awake through her nightmares. To her, he was everything. Still, the room's eyes lingered. Some smiled kindly, touched by his courage. Others looked away, unsure how to react. Emma felt the stares prickling at her skin, but her father placed a steady hand on the table, as if to anchor her against the tide of attention. The event began. Children stepped on stage one by one, reading poems about their mothers, their voices sweet and proud. Emma listened, her card still clutched in her lap, her throat tight with emotion. When her turn came, she walked forward nervously, her father's encouraging gaze following her every step. She read her poem, her voice trembling at first, but steadying as she went on. Though the words were written with mother in mind, every syllable was meant for the man sitting in the back row, watching with misty eyes. The applause was polite, but for Emma, it was the only sound she needed. When she returned to her seat, she slid her handmade card across the table. Her father unfolded it slowly, the hearts and glitter shimmering in the light. His hand shook slightly as he held it, but his smile was steady, filled with pride. Emma leaned into him then, her small shoulder pressing against his side. The whispers hadn't vanished, but they no longer mattered, because for that moment, the seat beside her wasn't empty. It was filled with love strong enough to silence the world. The event moved forward, each child proudly offering poems, cards, and hugs to their mothers. The cafeteria echoed with laughter, clinking cups, and the rustle of wrapping paper from small handmade gifts. Everywhere, tables were filled with pairs, mother and child, sharing smiles and small moments of affection. At one table, however, there was something different. Emma sat close to her father, her handmade card now unfolded in his hands. The glitter stuck unevenly, the crayon heart slightly off-center, but to him, it was more beautiful than anything he had ever received. He ran his callous fingers gently over the paper, as if it were something fragile, something priceless. Emma, though still shy, felt her chest swell with relief. She wasn't alone. The chair beside her wasn't empty, and her father's presence filled more space than she thought possible. He didn't just sit with her. He claimed that space proudly, reminding her that she belonged just as much as anyone else. Still, the murmurs lingered. Some children pointed, their whispers rising and falling like little waves across the room. A few mothers glanced with sympathetic smiles, while others avoided looking altogether. Emma noticed, her heart dipping again, but her father's steady presence beside her shielded her from the sharp edges of judgment. As the time came for children to present their gifts, Emma hesitated. She watched as her classmates eagerly handed their cards to their mothers, leaning into embraces filled with warmth and recognition. For a moment, she froze, clutching her card tighter, afraid of how the room would react when she handed hers to a father instead. But then she remembered the nights he worked late to keep the lights on, the mornings he braided her hair clumsily before school, the way he held her hand when she felt small and afraid. With a deep breath, she slid the card toward him, her eyes searching his face. Her father accepted it as though she had given him the world. His eyes glistened, his smile soft but unshakable. The cafeteria around them blurred into background noise as he read the words written in her careful handwriting. Each sentence, meant for a mother, landed squarely in his heart, reminding him that though he had never chosen this journey, he had embraced it fully. For a moment, something shifted in the room. The whispers quieted, replaced by a few smiles and nods. One mother, sitting nearby, leaned closer to watch, her expression softening as she witnessed the exchange. Slowly, others followed, their judgment melting into quiet admiration. Emma noticed too. She saw the way the eyes around them began to change, not with pity but with respect. She felt her cheeks warm, not with embarrassment, but with a sense of pride she hadn't known she carried. Her dad wasn't just standing in for someone who was missing. He was standing tall as himself, enough in every way that mattered. The applause at the end of the event began with polite clapping but grew louder, fuller, and more heartfelt as the afternoon closed. though it wasn't directed solely at them. Emma felt the weight of it settle in her heart like a shield. For the first time all week, she didn't feel different. She felt seen. And her father, sitting beside her with the card held close to his chest, knew that his decision to walk into this room had been more than an act of courage. It had been a promise kept. As the event drew to its final moments, the principal stepped forward to thank everyone for attending. The children gathered in a small circle to sing a closing song, their voices high and pure, echoing to the cafeteria with a sweetness that softened even the hardest hearts. Emma stood among them, her small hands clapping in rhythm, her eyes searching for her father in the crowd. He was there, of course, sitting tall in his chair, smiling back at her. His presence was a lighthouse in the storm, steady and unwavering. And though he was the only father in a sea of mothers, he didn't shrink or falter. Instead, he leaned forward, clapping with the loudest hands, his pride uncontainable. When the song ended, parents were invited to take photos with their children. Mothers gathered in groups, adjusting hair and straightening dresses, while cameras clicked and laughter rose. Emma hesitated again, watching the pairs around her, but her father was already standing, already moving toward her with arms wide open, as if to remind her that she never had to wait for him. She ran to him, the hem of her dress swaying as she threw her arms around his waist. Someone nearby lifted a camera, capturing the moment before Emma even realized. The photo wasn't polished like the others. His shirt was wrinkled, her bow was crooked, and yet the picture radiated something more powerful than perfection. It radiated love. As they posed together, the principal's voice rang out. She acknowledged the mothers, their love and sacrifices, but then she paused, her eyes settling on Emma and her dad. With a warm smile, she added that families come in all shapes, that love wears many faces, and that the courage to show up is what defines a parent. The room grew still, and then, unexpectedly, applause broke out. It started softly, a few claps here and there, but quickly swelled into something stronger, something undeniable. Emma's cheeks flushed as she looked around, realizing the applause wasn't just for the event. It was for her father, for them. The whispers that had once made her shrink now transformed into acknowledgement, respect, even admiration. Her father didn't bow or wave. He simply held her hand tighter, his eyes glassy, but his smile strong. In that moment, Emma knew she wasn't just another child at the Mother's Day tea. She was the daughter of a man who had chosen to stand tall, even when the world questioned his place. As they left the cafeteria, the sunlight spilling through the open doors, Emma felt lighter than she had all week. She no longer carried the dread of being different. Instead, she carried the pride of being loved by someone who refused to let her feel less than whole. The ride home was quiet, but not in an empty way. It was a kind of silence filled with understanding, with unspoken words that didn't need to be said. Emma glanced at the card he had tucked safely into his pocket, knowing he would keep it forever, not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. That day, a little girl learned that love could rewrite traditions, and a father proved that sometimes the bravest hearts sit at tables where they're least expected. Together, they turned whispers into applause, and in doing so, they reminded everyone watching that love, when shown fully and without shame, was more powerful than any label, any event, or any expectation. And for Emma, Mother's Day would never feel incomplete again.